Although a documentary on mammals doesn't count as a dinosaur documentary in the strictest sense, it is still a documentary focused on paleontology. Interesting enough, in an alternate universe, there might have been a mammal boom instead of a saurian one. The idea of walking with beasts was actually coming from the first Walking Dinosaurs pitch. Originally, the series was going to go backwards in time, starting from the Age of Mammals and going all the way back to the Cameron explosion. However, dinosaurs were popular, so the first one of the series was instead designed to be around dinosaurs in order to capitalize on that boom. In the end, however, I think it worked out. Things that tend to flow, like fur, are pretty notorious for being extremely difficult with early CG. Especially the fledgling CG of its time, it's kind of a blessing in disguise, giving the CGI breathing room for the artists to catch up. The research from Beasts started Raptor's predecessor and took about 2 years. There was a lot more locations the producers wanted to do, and there was talk of doing more episodes than the Dinosaur 6, including an Australia episodes. However, the reliable 6 won out in the end, and they went on an expedition, shooting nature shots in Florida, Mexico, Java, Arizona, Brazil, South Africa, and Yukon. The graphics had to be better than dinosaurs. The subject this time were mammals. If they knew off, their audience would 100% know. The average person might not exactly know what a dinosaur is supposed to look like, but the Age of Mammals is when things start to get a bit familiar. Animations and design were a bit more complex, in part due to fur as we mentioned, but also just the necessity to get things right. We know a lot more about mammals than we do dinosaurs, so in general, we have a lot more knowledge in how they move, and as such, need to design the mammals to move accordingly. Also, many mammals in this documentary was the first time, and sadly last time, for them to see a documentary. So this would be the first time that a lot of them would get a model, not just in the Walking With series, but in a documentary in general. It should be noted how groundbreaking Walking with Beasts was, but for different reasons than dinosaurs. This put the big spotlight on the Age of Mammals, not kind of the ones that shared an age with hominids like mammoths and rhinos. Ancient mammals in general don't get a lot of attention, at the very least prehistoric ones do not. Marvel than not, they get shafted in documentaries and paleo media in general, and I think that part of it is because people obviously like dinosaurs a bit more, but I think it's a big shame considering that just how weird things got, especially the early Age of Mammals. The Age of Dinosaurs is almost entirely alien. The world is pretty unrecognizable unless you get closer to the Cretaceous. The Age of Mammals is pretty interesting. There's a reflection of the present day that you can see when looking at this point in deep time that I just find fascinating. So, did all the research make a difference? Or in the end, did the mammals' big break end up to nothing? Although not to the heights of Walking With, it still gained 4 times the amount of viewers that BBC normally would. Critics once again were harsh, saying they prefer more of the same, and others criticized, saying it focused too much on children. But in my opinion, this surpassed the original, and this is my favorite of the Walking With trilogy. Part of it has to do to the improved narrative. The storyline of the documentary usually focuses on an anchor. This anchor is usually a popular animal to focus viewpoints on, and immediate focus on the animal around it. I felt the anchors for this series were strong for the most part. In Dinosaurs, the only narrative I felt really good was Giant in the Skies. I liked the focus on the old Orinocarus traveling to the mating grounds. The rest weren't bad, but Beast has a lot more great anchors. My favorites being Whale Killer, with a focus on the mother Basilosaurus trying to survive in a time of few, and Sabretooth, with its story about the pride of saber-toothed cats and the male getting pushed out of the pride. There's also an overarching plot of evolution as well. The narrator talks about the descendants of animals seen in previous episodes. It also is pretty noticeable due to it handling human evolution in a way unlike any other before. Although discussed in an episode of Paleo World before, the combination of CGI and new advancements in the knowledge of human evolution helped bring it closer than any before. Of course, the CGI hasn't aged super well, same as predecessors. There are also a few time-shifted animals like the Calicothere and the zebra carcass, and in addition, similar to the documentary before it, 20 years of paleontology has made the science age quite a bit. Our inherent knowledge of mammals has helped it cushion a bit, but it's still aged. However, as I mentioned before, this is the best of the Walking series in my opinion. Once again, like Dinosaurs before it, Beasts was followed by a special. This one was a little different though. It would still follow the nature documentary angle, but a more action-filled one. They wouldn't just show you dinosaurs, but this time bring back a man back to the age of the dinosaurs. This documentary would be in a style popularized by Steve Irwin, one that I nickname the Adventure Nature documentary. But who would host it? To Tim Haynes, there's only one answer: Nigel Marven.
I'm not being reckless. I'm not in any danger. The Komodos are concentrating on their feast. But I wouldn't want to get that much closer. That is absolutely gross. There's one there that went right inside the carcass and there was all maggots crawling on the side of its mouth. Oh, dear me.
Nigel Marven is a man who is oftentimes compared to the crocodile hunter himself. Most of the time, in my opinion, someone compares a wildlife communicator to Steve Irwin, it's only due to the recklessness they have when handling animals. In my opinion, it shouldn't be the stunts or the danger that would make the comparison stick. To me, the real sticking point is the love and enthusiasm they would have for nature. You can see it in Steve Irwin, and you can see it as well in Nigel Marven as he laughs and smiles when he handles animals of all sizes. Even at a glance, you could really see he's a man that just adores nature. So when the BBC called him to do a safari millions of years in the past, he practically jumped at the opportunity. And so, Land of Giants and The Giant Claw were created. This documentary was shot pretty similar actually to the other Walking With series, save for Nigel Marven obviously. They had to shoot in Australia and the Canary Islands. Nigel being there meant that he had to interact with CG animals, a first of its kind for a documentary. The animatronics before would come in clutch, helping sell close-up shots when he'd wrestle prehistoric animals and explain the various adaptations. Nigel was the main selling point, and it did not disappoint. When you watch a dinosaur documentary, there's a bit of a disconnect there, usually in some shots. Nigel's reactions to the animals there sold the documentary, in my opinion. His enthusiasm as he shows the camera crew the different dinosaurs make you feel that he's there with the animals. And the documentary wouldn't be half as good without Nigel himself. I honestly don't think anyone else could have done it. The massive grin that he has as he explores these prehistoric worlds is very infectious. The documentary was a moderate success. It only attracted half the viewers of Beast, but it still had and still has its fans. Some critics were very surprised with Nigel's acting, calling it worthy of an Oscar. Although he never did get his Oscar, the team did win awards for special effects, and he himself got a few awards for this trouble. The documentary really helps sell them as animals. Part of the reason they wanted Nigel there have a set of scale that you could really tell how large they were, and it works for the most part. These dinosaur models are still pretty good for the time period. Although looking back, a naked therizinosaur just feels really, really wrong. For whatever reason, Walking With really never did feathered dinosaurs. It was really weird because it was around the 90s when feathers started to have concrete evidence for existing on dinosaurs. Definitely so in the early 2000s when Liaoning discoveries from the fossil beds there brought definite evidence of modern non-avian dinosaurs. In 2002, the Walking With series was edited down and re-narrated by Ben Stiller for a younger American audience under the name Prehistoric Planet for Discovery Kids. Although it's obviously for kids, the appeal kind of seems strange nowadays, but back when you didn't have access to every single show under streaming services, it was a way for a kid to rewatch it sometimes. It had various quizzes and info cards that would place on it. It wasn't the best way to watch the series, but overall it was harmless. I could even see a little kid enjoying it more due to just grabbing one's attention. But that wasn't the only thing BBC was releasing during that year. Walking With would have a series closer to home than any before. The next BBC special would walk in the shoes of our human ancestors. Walking With Cavemen is an oddity even among the rest of the Walking With series. It is a documentary series like the past ones, but the nature presentation style is for the most part downplayed. Instead, it has a presentator similar to the previous one. But there's a regional difference between the two. Alec Baldwin hosted the American version, while Robert Winston hosted the British one. It's a bit of a stylistic choice that's evolved from Land of Giants. I can't speak for the Alec Baldwin one because I didn't really watch it. The Robert Winston one gives a different energy from Nigel Marven, and it's not a bad one. Nigel Marven's energy is like if you give an 8-year-old kid a Monster Energy drink, give him a PhD in zoology, and then put him in a man's body. Robert Winston, not a stranger to science communication, presents information to you in a friendly way.
That's my mother when she was 4. That's one generation ago. Look at the sulky face. She sulks just like I do now. She'd just run away from home. And there's my grandfather wearing his major's uniform. This would have been about 1916, time of the First World War. And then over the page, we've got my grandmother with her mother, Julia. That's my great-grandmother. So that's 3 generations ago. But supposing we could go back not just 1 generation, or 2 generations, or even 3 generations, but 300 generations.
One isn't better than the other, but I can see different people enjoying different styles. Presentation isn't the only difference between this one and the older series. Like the previous series, the CGI takes a backseat for the most part actually. Although there are CG animals of course, the main focus of the series are hominids, and they are portrayed by actors in heavy makeup and prosthetics. This really takes a spotlight. The amount of rigor in choosing and training the actors was really high. Out of 2,000 actors that took the casting call, they only selected 14. Those 14 had to do a 5-week class in order to get body language and voices right. They had to work with various scientists and specialists to get it as close to accurate as they could at the time. These prosthetics took 5 hours to place, and once they were set, it was really hard to do things like eating and drinking in there. But why prosthetics and not CG? Until recently, it was pretty unfeasible to make realistic humans with CG that didn't have any sort of uncanny valley effect. If the CG to the early humans looked off, it would have honestly ruined part of the documentary's goal, just to make you feel closer to your ancestry, and in my opinion it works really well. The documentary is not perfect, and it has a few inaccuracies. It might be due to the hindsight, but it is weird that they say humans were only hominins with imagination. Although, evidence of Neanderthal culture was discovered fairly later down the line, so it is excusable, but in general, I've never really liked that even before. In general, though, the show avoids a personal pet peeve I have with human evolution documentary series. Usually, when the main focus is human evolution, a lot of the time, these series treat humanity as if it's nature's greatest creation. Like, it's the pinnacle of all evolution, which isn't really the case. Not that I don't think humans are special, I am one, but at the end of the day, we're just another animal. We're still subject to natural processes like climate change, extinction, diseases, and the like. However, Walking with Cavemen doesn't show humanity as if it's at the top of evolution. Instead, it shows humanity's various traits and boons, and about how some are more useful than others to help it progress to the modern human. The way the series focuses on each of the hominids getting various traits that make humans what they are, it makes for a very interesting narrative. In addition, I like how they show the hominids slowly becoming humans mentally. When you see both, it makes for interesting progression. Overall, it's not entirely expected special from BBC, but it is a welcome one. Next BBC special, though not a Walking With series, reused footage from Beasts and Cavemen, along with putting their own work down, and was similar enough in theme to the last special we talked about. Monsters We Met was another BBC human-centric special that focused on the megafauna we hunted in the United States, Australia, and New Zealand. There have been plenty of human migration documentaries in the past, but this one shares an interesting point of view with it. Monsters We Met talks about the various wildlife in this region, and specifically human impact on various regions as an invasive species. It's honestly not every day that we have a documentary like this that brings up that as the main theme, and it actually works very well. At the same time, it shows the humans not as some big horde that destroys the environment, but instead struggling to survive, and showing the actual genius it would have taken for humans back then to conquer the wilderness. It's a pretty complex topic to think about. Climate change and habitats is horrible and hard to reverse, but humans do that at least in part to survive. Humans are, in my opinion, the most powerful of the environmental engineers. Really interesting to have a documentary that takes that bent. The documentary doesn't focus entirely on doom and gloom, pointing out that despite all the bad humans have done to the environment, we've also helped make native lands thrive, like the Tapu lands in New Zealand, which I found a pleasant surprise. I don't like a lot of the "we are the virus" messages that are pretty ham-fisted in 2000s and even sometimes a modern environmental message. It's completely nihilistic and ignores that we honestly can work with the environment if we really put our minds and effort into it. I believe that humans can actually minimize humanity's impact on nature, which takes a bit of engineering and thought. Monsters We Met, though, points out that since humanity is one of the more successful environmental engineers that ever evolved, we most likely can make a better place if we had enough effort into it. The documentary does have its problems. The CG isn't the best in some scenes, and is excessively melodramatic when talking about the dangers humans had to face. Also, two of the apex predators, although making for very interesting set pieces, are kind of dubious if they were a threat to humanity. It's unknown whether the Komodo dragon Megalania lived at the same time as humans. Although the time frame might have lined up, it's not 100%. As for the Host eagle, there's no evidence that it did ever hunt humans, but it could have potentially done so, but there's not a whole lot of evidence either way. Still, these are nitpicks, and this documentary is pretty worth a watch. At the very least, it's nice to see the Maori and Aboriginal people of Australia represented. In my opinion, they're pretty underrepresented in documentaries, which are most of the time Eurocentric. However, as Britain looked more and more closer to the present, back home, Discovery Channel was looking to bring the distant past back to the future once again. Instead of following the mammal trend, they worked on a spiritual successor to when dinosaurs roamed America. One that, to some people's opinion, surpassed even its predecessor.